All right, here we go. Welcome to the podcast. I am Ollie Lewis, and today I'm here with my brother Sammy and my sister Kailey. Before we get into the topic of this podcast, I want to do a quick introduction. This will probably be the first podcast that I upload, and there have been a few different things that have motivated me to start doing this podcast. One of the biggest motivating factors for me to start has been the COVID lockdowns. There hasn't been as much going on these days. Today is January 24th, 2021, and here in Ottawa, we are in what they're calling a state of emergency. All non-essential businesses are closed, and we are being told to socially distance and stay at home as much as possible. Now that I have some more time on my hands, I decided to put some of that time into podcasting. In the past few years, I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and I still like listening to podcasts, but I also wanted to step in the game and not just be on the sidelines. I'm pretty curious and I like learning new things, and this podcast is some extra motivation for me to learn and develop. I think conversation is one of the best ways to learn new things and strengthen your own ideas. You get challenged and tested, and your mind is open up to new perspectives. This is what I'm trying to get out of the podcast. I'm not coming here with the mindset that my opinion is so valuable and that people need to hear what I'm saying. That's not it. I know I might say some things that are wrong or even embarrassing, but I just want to open up the doors, open up the conversation, learn new things, and sharpen my ideas. If you hear me say something you disagree with, that's great. Let me know. I want my ideas to be checked and challenged. The goal of the podcast is to have an open discussion and learn through enjoyable conversations. I also like the idea of creating a platform for putting ideas out there. If you're listening to this and you're someone who wants to talk about a specific topic, or if you've always wanted your voice to be heard, or any other reason for wanting to do a podcast, just shoot me a message and we'll try to organize something. I'm open to talk about pretty much whatever. The topics on this podcast will probably vary a fair bit. This podcast it's also a challenge. It's a goal. It's something meaningful for me to spend my time on. And this kind of leads into the topic that I want to get into today, which is meaning. A lot of the ideas I want to bring to the table today are from the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. And I had read this book a while ago and I really, really liked it. But I kind of brought it to the front of the queue for talking about it on the podcast, because I figured it's very relevant to today and what people are going through right now with the coronavirus. I feel like people maybe more than ever are suffering from a lack of meaning in their lives, and they don't have any meaningful goals to strive for, and maybe they had them, but the lockdown has kind of forced them to withdraw from those, and they have far more additional leisure time and not a lot of goals to be striving for. And what do you guys think about that? Like, do you find, like, with yourselves, the lockdown has prevented you from any meaningful goals, or do you see that in society as a whole, like your friends or your family or whoever, are they struggling a little bit with this these days?
Mm-hmm. I think so. First of all, thanks for having us here on your podcast. It's quite the studio you've built down here.
Yes, thank you. It's
Eventually
good to
we'll get
be
video
here.
going and we'll show people the studio, but that might be a little while from now.
But yeah, I definitely feel like COVID has kind of just shook things up. I mean, for me personally, but I assume for so many people. And then the kind of lack of like social life that comes from like all these lockdowns. Definitely, like, personally for me, like, I can feel the depression like coming in a little bit more.
Yeah.
And you kind of, like you're saying, it definitely, you can kind of like, once your whole world kind of gets flipped from like these lockdowns, you definitely kind of lose the sense of meaning in a way, like once your routine changes so drastically.
Yeah, and I think one of the main problems with the COVID lockdown and kind of disturbing people's meaning in their life is that the duration of how long COVID is going to be going on for is unknown, and that makes it a little bit more difficult to plan for the future, because a lot of what provides people meaning is a future aim, a future goal that they're striving for, that is keeping them going every day. But with COVID being so uncertain, week to week, things can completely change. I feel like that especially makes it really hard.
It's like you don't want to set any goals because you don't know if they're going to happen.
Yeah, it's so unpredictable what's going to happen. And that's a horrible environment for goal setting. In an environment where everything's super unpredictable and you don't know what's going to happen next month or next year, I feel like there'd be a tendency or even like a encouragement for people to act act with a lot more short-term goals in mind. Like they're not striving for like long-term gratification, like not striving for things that are gonna like big goals that are gonna be long lasting.
Right. So it's more instant gratification. And then do you think as a result that's kind of like increasing the depression levels, or kind of just like, I don't know necessarily depression, but almost just like mental health, like poor mental health in general?
Yeah, because this is always a problem that people suffer with, is like a lack of meaning in their lives. I know I've been at times, I can think of a time in particular, like a few years back, where like I just felt totally lost. Like I had a bit of an existential crisis, I guess. Like I was just like, what am I doing with my life? What am I, where, like, I guess I was thinking almost extremely big, like, what am I doing here on Earth? Like, where are we? Like, you think about even the universe and like the Earth rotating around the sun, and you're like, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? And you might even think like, who am I? Like, what am I doing? I was just completely lost, and that's a depressing place to be. And I think people, it's a very, very common problem. And one of the downsides with that is that when you're in those situations, you may be experiencing some of the like, you might be experiencing a little bit of depression or anxiety. And as a result, you might be like, oh, I'm depressed, but you're really just dealing with one of the most fundamental human problems that doesn't really ever go away, which is that you don't really know what to do with your life. Like it's in the book, their Man's Search for Meaning, they referred to it as the existential vacuum. And the way that he described it is that you can look at other animals and in comparison to humans, and other animals, they have their instincts where they basically have something that guides them, something that is going to lead them in certain directions in their life. Whereas humans, the instincts aren't as strong. You're very like cultivated by your environment, and you could be led in many, many directions. But like a deer is going to do deer things, and it's like a very, very simple life. But we have the freedom, and the freedom's great, but the freedom comes at a little bit of a price, meaning you have to figure out what you want to do. And one thing,
and we also have like the awareness to kind of just realize, like you said, that you're on this like world, and you're like, and I don't necessarily know what's going on. Whereas I think a deer doing deer things wouldn't necessarily question the deer things that he or she is doing.
Yeah. I mean, we have to get inside of the mind of the deer, but that could be an interesting experiment. But yeah, it is like humans, they don't have the instincts that drive them. And one thing in today's society that's kind of diminished from the past is we don't have as many traditions to guide us. Tradition and religion has always been something that kind of guides you and steers you towards certain values or certain goals. But as a society as a whole is kind of becoming, at least from what I can tell, less and less religious and less traditions, that also comes at a cost, and that will lead to more people being lost, essentially. Like they don't know what to do. So you could a lot of the time you could either do what other people are doing or do what other people are telling you to do. So like there's always the classic example of like, I don't know what to do, and your parents are like, you got to go do this, and you end up doing that, but it doesn't really make you happy.
Right. Although you can, like, it's not to say that without religion or tradition, like you can create your own tradition within your own community or your own life that creates meaning. Yeah. So it's not like and I don't think you mean it this way, but it's not like a lost cause now that we're, moving in a different direction. That's it. It's there's still hope, and there's still ways of creating meaning and tradition in your life.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that'd almost be a little bit like a grim podcast if I just talked about like, yeah, we don't have any of this stuff. It's hopeless. But like, eventually, yeah, we'll get into like some of the ways that you can strive for meaning, regardless of whatever the situation is. But Kailey, have you kind of seen that a little bit too? Like, I don't know, friends or just generally in society, people seem to be lost, or have you even felt that at some points in your life where meaning was a little bit of an issue?
Yeah, I have, and I am kind of similar to Sammy, just kind of assuming that other people are feeling that as well, because when you look at the situation currently, it's hard to find things to look forward to, or days kind of blend together, and you don't have as much to like define a day of like something exciting happening to you. And I feel like I'm working harder to create things that are exciting or stand out, or little goals within my week that I look forward to or try to accomplish. And in a way, I feel fortunate that I feel like right now I'm in a place where I am feeling motivated and that there's meaning in life, because I am working harder to find those little things within a day or a week that to strive for and that bring me joy. But in the beginning of all of this, when we were in the beginning of the lockdown, I did find it harder. I was kind of a little bit lost of like, what am I doing? Oh, I guess you just wait this out. And then it's like, oh no, we have to be more proactive than that. And so now I feel like I'm in a better place where I am being proactive.
Like, how important are the social interactions to your mental health? Like, they're very important,
so important,
right?
Yeah, I think humans naturally are just a very social. We're very social people, and it's almost like a need and not so much of a want. Like,
yeah,
I mean,
right.
if you ever think,
sure.
you know, you guys have ever heard of that example of like a baby? Oh, what is it? Like, babies can even die if they don't get the touch or like the connection with another human, and it's not because they were. Yeah, it's not because they were starving or whatever. It's because they didn't have that human connection, and that's at least a point you could argue for it being a need and not so much of a want.
And that's something though, because I feel like it's so easy to forget like the direct correlation between like the social life and then feeling better, and it's so easy to just kind of, because it's not something like physical, I guess, like eating food or something, but
I think when things aren't tangible, it's harder to, like, when you can't like quantify something and say like 15 minutes of walking every day, like doctors might say, oh, walking is good for your heart or something, or we've done studies and 20 minutes of exercise a day will help with this and this and this. It's harder when you say, hey, hanging out with your friend for an hour and having some laughs is going to have the same benefits, but you can't quantify 10 laughs per hour with this friend. Like,
exactly.
But it doesn't make it less true. It doesn't make it less of a thing or more or less essential than your walks or your nutritious food. It just is harder for doctors and health professionals to say, do these things, because you don't have the equation of this plus this equals less stress and therefore better for your body and all these things.
That's like, I feel like that's information that is not necessarily commonly known or like out there, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
Like, do you think that most people understand like the importance of basically a social life?
I feel like people would have a natural craving towards it, so like you know what I mean, like I feel like they somewhat know that they require that, but it might not be that much full of an understanding.
I feel like I don't even like fully understand it. It's like not something I put on the top of my priority list.
Me neither.
It's just like, it's something that just like would naturally happen. So then during lockdowns like this, when it's gone, I don't like think about like putting it on like a list of like to-dos,
like scheduling it like you would exercise. Like, I gotta work out today, I gotta like do this for now, because that would be weird if like your doctor gave you a prescription or whatever.
Give a buddy a call there.
But I heard a brain surgeon speaking about how he's like, people might think, oh, I'll do like a crossword puzzle each day to keep my brain sharp or something, and he's like, doing a crossword puzzle or word search or something like that, where it's like one thing where you can say like, I did one crossword puzzle today, is less beneficial than like having a nice phone call with a friend. And he's like, but no one is saying, like, he's like, I would say, instead of doing your crossword puzzle, actually just phone a friend.
Right.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
it's
Kailey,
interesting.
do you think, because I know you've read a bunch about this stuff, like, do you think that like a Zoom call or a phone call is like a acceptable substitute for like meeting in person? Like, can you get the same social benefits from like...
Good question. I think that's a really good question. Not something that I feel 100% confident answering as a fact, but I do feel that it's more about the connection rather than the actual like seeing someone in person. There's something about like the physiological changes of being in a room of laughter and being around people or a physical touch. However, I think that just connecting with people and having meaningful conversations and being able to share real feelings that's very beneficial as well. I don't think we should, I like personally don't think it should be just discounted as like, oh, don't bother, it's not as helpful. I just think that they're different, and in person is important, but I don't think that phone calls or video chats are not helpful as well.
Right.
And this like social interaction is one of the ways for sure that people can find meaning in their life. In the book there, Man's Search for Meaning, he basically outlines 3 of the main ways that people find meaning in their life, or that places that you can find it. Number 1 is striving for a certain goal, or like trying to create a project or a work. And that one's pretty self-explanatory. You're just striving to create something, and for a lot of people that is extremely meaningful, depending on if it's a creative project or project of interest, whatever it is. And another way is your social connections, like the love that you have, the like even just experiencing nature or like art or like beauty or whatever, and that's pretty self-explanatory as well. Like most people can see yeah, of course that provides you with meaning, the relationships that you have. And the third one that he said is another place for meaning is a little bit less self-explanatory. He says that meaning is also found in suffering. And I want to give a little bit of background of this book for anybody who doesn't really know what I'm talking about or where this is coming from. But this book is basically, it's written by a psychiatrist who survived 4 concentration camps during World War II. And he basically lived through the midst of some of the worst suffering that a human being could go through. He was in the like more famous concentration camp Auschwitz, and he was alongside with many other prisoners who were treated horribly, and they were in a situation where there was an unknown duration. They didn't know when this thing was going to end. It could have been forever. So as far as they could tell, this was a never-ending suffering for them. It was basically hell. They were getting treated terribly, weren't eating well, and they would get packed onto buses and sleeping like, I don't know, in terrible conditions. But he survived that, and so did other prisoners. I don't know the numbers, but he was able to find meaning within that, and it was actually the meaning that he found within the suffering that allowed him to survive it. As he's reflecting upon his experience,
right,
he sees that by the attitude that he took towards the suffering was what allowed him to persevere.
So I've never read the book. So when you say he finds meaning in the suffering, like, is he kind of like looking ahead at what life could be like if he gets out of there, or is he like looking at his current day to day and he's like, there's some sort of meaning like in here while I'm here?
Yeah, he would see that there was meaning in there while he was there.
Was it
Go ahead.
Was it because he was thinking like these are good skills to like be able to possess if I'm looking at like the strength of my mind and my resilience and my endurance? Like, was that the meaning?
That's basically it. Like,
Okay.
and he goes on to say that in essentially every single situation that life provides you with, there's always an opportunity for something. It may not be the opportunity that you wanted, but in his situation that he's presented with horrible suffering, he was able to see the opportunity that presented him, which was developing the internal strength and showing off some of the most remarkable human capabilities. Like, if you were to see a prisoner being treated that horribly and them also acting very, like, maintaining their values and still remaining strong and being ethical under that amount of stress. Because what happened, and not everybody was like that, there was a lot of prisoners that he witnessed that under this stress and pressure, a lot of them completely abandoned their values and almost became like animalistic. Like, they would maybe they were good people before, but they
Just
they
so desperate.
they would steal people's food, they would lie, they would do whatever it took to survive. They were like, that's kind of like how an animal would be, where it's like, it's just the instinct is survive at all costs. Whether we throw somebody else under the bus, whatever you do, like, just survive. But there were prisoners that maintained like exceptional inner strength, essentially. And it was that perspective that they had, that they saw the challenges that were thrown at them as an opportunity to test their character, essentially. That all of the suffering was just like, all right, let's test it out, let's see if we can handle this.
What?
And there was even like a quote of, I guess one of the prisoners that he was with said something like, all right, we got lots of suffering to do today. And like, they looked at it like a task almost.
Wow.
Right.
And he saw that the prisoners that didn't look at it like that thought, this is meaningless suffering, what are we doing here, this is terrible, they would start to degenerate. Like, their health would degenerate. They're like, this is hopeless.
Right.
Their immune system actually had an effect.
That's interesting.
That's very interesting. I really, that's very, very interesting. And I have noticed, so I also haven't read the book, but have read a number of books on by people who have survived the Holocaust and their experiences in concentration camps. So I'm visualizing just the awful experience that was. I'm wondering though, because I've noticed in my own life, as I mentioned, I feel like I'm in a better place of being able to find meaning, and whereas months ago I maybe didn't feel that way. Does he talk about the idea that for some people that kind of survival desperation is all they know, because they lack the, maybe just the self-awareness or the skills that it requires to even have that level of or that ability to think that way? Like, I know people can go that way, but I'm also thinking of people who could be hearing what Viktor Frankl is trying to say and say, all I can do is survive right now. Like, that's a lot to ask of me, to even be trying to do more than just like get out of bed every day. Like, what does he suggest for people who don't that doesn't click right away as like, oh, okay, like, let me just try to be more like find the meaning in the suffering, because sometimes that is easier to say than to do.
Yeah, I mean, it's always a very challenging situation, and everybody's situation is super unique. So to provide like a general advice would be, I mean, the main principle that he talks about over and over is that your meaning is found in taking responsibility, regardless of the situation.
Right.
So if you are presented with a something unfortunate, something that you didn't wish would have happened, the meaning is in accepting that and then continually trying to pursue like right action, like just do what's best and accept it.
Yeah, that's
right,
really
so
interesting. Practice too, I imagine. Just it takes a lot with your thought process and the way your self-talk and your attitude and perspective, but kind of being easy on yourself, that this isn't something that just kind of suddenly is a shift, that you will find meaning in suffering. It might be a longer journey of at first being like, wow, this really is awful, to how am I kind of able to strengthen myself.
It is something
this.
that's just like extremely difficult. Like I even think about those prisoners. Most of the prisoners didn't have the same attitude that him and a lot of the ones that survived did. Because it would be so challenging to have that attitude when you're just years on end dealing with this horrible suffering. Like, to maintain the strength to carry on throughout that whole thing is insane, almost. So if people are feeling challenged, like, how can I just I'm going through a tough situation. Like, I can't just like flip my mentality. It doesn't seem that easy. It's not, but. I mean, when you think about it like that, and you look at those people for the remarkable ability that they had to maintain their strength and continue on, and just hopefully that alone kind of you admire that fact that they were able to endure such a tough thing, and that might encourage people as well, just to know that it is humanly possible. There are people that do endure very extremely difficult things where most people may lose hope, but to know that it is possible to not lose hope should be encouraging.
It is, yeah. I find his story, from what you have said and what I've just kind of done a quick search of, is inspiring.
I'm just thinking about, like, for me, or maybe somebody listening or something who's like thinking about these. I'm just trying to think about like bringing these concepts into like a practical sense, like for dealing with COVID right now. Yeah. Because I definitely know at certain times it almost feels like definitely feels like suffering in a sense, like not to the same degree obviously, but it's like I feel like I can definitely just get lost in it almost feels like you don't have control over these things or something. But hearing that kind of story is like, I guess it's about trying to develop like the mental awareness to kind of just put your head in the right place, so you can maybe just change your perspective of the situation, and like that's the thing that could probably help you. Yeah,
that's what he said was the main thing that allowed people to like endure it is their attitude towards the difficult situation. And it's, I feel like a more practical thing for COVID is just the general idea of when you receive a difficult circumstance and it blocks maybe the opportunities that you wish you had, opportunities right now to maybe go out to restaurants and go to the bars, hang out with friends and family. Those opportunities are blocked, but a lot of the time new opportunities are presented. They might not have been the opportunities that you were looking for. I mean, they probably are not the opportunities that you were looking for, but they are other opportunities. And one of them is that, like for COVID, at least I find, is you just have more time to reflect, and like it's more like an internal growth, kind of like you have more time to be with yourself and just think about things. That's one thing. And then if you think about it, there's a lot of opportunities that are out there still. You just kind of need to explore. I mean, the podcast is one for me. I mean, obviously they're not always easy to find, but that's the thing is there are other opportunities regardless of what has been presented. Right. And in Viktor Frankl's situation, his opportunity was to show the remarkable human capabilities. And COVID's not nearly as bad of a situation as that would have been. But I'm sure if there's a opportunity that presented itself in that horrible of a situation, I'm sure there's some here too.
Right. So there's always an opportunity, even when it doesn't seem like it. There's always something to be found.
Yeah.
I think of two things, Sammy, when you mentioned like what are some practical things today. I recently was thinking about you know how have you guys ever had a compliment that's really stuck with you, or perhaps the opposite? Someone's maybe made a comment, and that's also stuck with you, but it wasn't the nicest thing, maybe. And that has reminded me, it's made me feel more empowered about the difference you can make in someone's life when you don't feel like you can do something, or when you feel hopeless in a situation, because something like a compliment, which is like just verbal, is like can be very powerful and stick with someone for years down the road. And similarly, to yourself, the way you speak to yourself, that maybe the compliments you give to yourself or the thought process you have can make a big difference. And so you do always have control in that sense, that you can empower yourself or others.
That's true. And I feel like not even just stick with somebody, but almost like change like the course of their life sometimes, like with compliments and stuff. I'm just thinking about like being a kid or something, and somebody at some point was probably like, hey, like, you're really good at guitar, like that sounds amazing.
Yeah That's one of the like massive things that I feel like anybody could do if they're noticing their friends or family are struggling with meaning. They don't know what to do with their life, they don't know where to go, is that there's not a lot of encouragement out there. And just the simple encouragement can actually completely steer somebody's life in a different direction. Like you just convince somebody, you convince them to pursue the goal that they maybe been thinking about. Because I feel like there's two states that people might be in where they're kind of lacking meaning in their life. And the first one is they genuinely just have no idea what direction to go to. And that just takes a little bit more exploring. And a lot of time there is meaning to be found. You just need to think about the things that you value. There's friends and family that you of course value. There's like experiences or maybe some sort of projects. There's stuff to be found, but it just needs to be searched for. But the other second situation where people might be feeling a little bit meaningless is that they might know something that would provide them meaning, but they're getting blocked by some fear or some doubt or whatever it is. And in those situations, a little bit of encouragement or like pushing somebody, no, like, come on, you can do this, I know you can do it, that is very, very beneficial. And a lot of the time, unfortunately, that's hard to find. Like just a little, that's all sometimes people need, is just a little boost. Like they're on the edge of like, I don't know if I should go do this. And it's in taking action and taking responsibility and going to, and it's action, doing things and going towards goals is what provides you with meaning. And some people are too hesitant and they end up not going towards anything, and as a result they're not experiencing a lot of meaning in their life.
So I guess to bring it full circle to the point that I guess Kailey originally you were probably trying to make, is that you essentially have a lot more power than you realize in kind of how you affect other people that you interact with. Is that
that's right? And it's provided me I think more meaning in what I normally, or what I felt like was kind of feeling like a meaningless time in my life with the lockdown and COVID and not being able to do as much as I normally would. And now I've kind of decided to make the shift of but what can I do for other people, and even, you know, when someone is suffering that you care about, the idea that you're kind of like, oh, what can I do for you? I can't do anything, or I can't even see you, or whatever it is. And then the idea that it's like, oh, but I do have a lot more power than I realize with my words, or helping that person see what their abilities are and what they're capable of. And those things are not limited right now.
Yeah, and everybody has a unique ability to provide certain things to everybody. Like you have a unique ability to, you, Kailey, have a unique ability to like provide your input and your support and your take or whatever it is. The general point is that everybody has a unique thing that they provide to other people, and that is a source for meaning. Like everybody means something to someone or something. Right. I feel like it could almost be as simple as like you have like you either have like people that are really meaningful in your life, or you could be supporting, if somebody's like really into nature, they might have like a I don't know, like they're like feeding a lot of animals or who knows what. Like you're taking care of animals, you're taking care of people, you're whatever it is. Everybody has their unique thing, and there was an example in the book that Viktor Frankl went through where he kind of talked through a couple of the other prisoners that were feeling suicidal. Which was very, very common in the prison camp. They're going through horrible suffering and they have no meaning. But he introduced the perspective to them about the meaning that they do have. And for one of the prisoners, he had he was like really into developing his works in science, and he had a book that he hadn't finished. And this is a unique book. It's his unique take on some of the science topics that nobody else could ever provide. And in realizing that this is an unfinished thing, like you got to get back and do that. That was a meaningful thing for that guy to say, you know what, I am gonna kind of continue on through these difficult times, and if I'm gonna finish that book, I want to do that. And for another person, he had a daughter back at home. And for him, he almost forgot. He was in a state of mind where he forgot about that. But Viktor Frankl was able to remind him back of that meaningful thing.
Right.
And it was that thing that allowed him to endure the rest of the camp, because he thought, I have my daughter back at home. Nobody is going to... He's uniquely going to love and care for that daughter. Nobody else can replace that. And it's that uniqueness that everybody has. Nobody else could write that same science report. Nobody else could show that
that's
to
beautiful.
his daughter.
It's an interesting thing to note too, that like you often like have to be reminded of these things by somebody else in a sense. I just feel like it's really easy to just look at your own life and be like, there's no meaning in this, and just brush everything off.
Yeah.
And then but from like an outside perspective, it's easier, like if I just think about looking at somebody else and I'm like, you have so much meaning, but my life, not that meaningful, you know? And for whatever reason that is, it's just like negative kind of self-talk. It's just like so much easier to be nice to somebody else, I guess.
Yeah, it is almost scary in a sense that happens, because that can happen a lot, very, very frequently, where somebody might feel like my life is meaningless, but you might look at them and be like, hey, like you know how important you are to that person and that person, and like what about that project you were working on? That's really like important. But people lose a grip of that, and I feel like their awareness of where the meaning actually is in their life is really narrowed. But like, and all it takes is somebody speaking to them for a little bit, and their perspective of what could be meaningful just expands, and they're like, wow, actually there's that and there's that. There's more than you initially thought.
So I heard on a different podcast a practical exercise to kind of feel more positive, grateful, and I think overall feel happier. And I'm thinking, I want your guys' opinion if you feel that this could also be helping in having meaning. So the exercise is that within a day, when either something has gone right, whether it's something you have done or just something that you appreciate or are happy about, to actually take a moment to think about that thing. So, for example, I enjoy drinking tea, and in the morning I now open the cupboard and look at all the mugs I have. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. I have so many cool mugs that I get to pick from. Like, which will I pick today for my tea? And that seems like pretty trivial. That's pretty silly. But what I've noticed now that I've been doing this for a little while is that I do feel better, because I've actually taken a time to like put a pin in these moments. So now they stick out more. So when I'm like, oh, that delivery I ordered, it arrived a day early. I don't just go, cool, it arrived a day early. I actually think that's pretty sweet, like a whole day early. And I get excited about things that aren't necessarily that exciting, and you could easily say like, oh, whatever, those things don't mean much. But now I notice overall I'm just kind of like, I see those things more. I'm like, oh, that's great.
Do you think that happened because of COVID, and maybe the bigger things that you would have put more attention on are not there? So now you're appreciating the little things that were always there, but now you're just your perspective has changed on them, and now your mugs bring you great joy.
But I think that's definitely like a great practice, and definitely something that I could work on a little bit, because for whatever reason, like it's so much easier to like I feel like the negative things that happen in a day just like stick with you, and it's so much easier to recall them. Like if you were to be like, how was your day today? It'd be like, oh, I got splashed by that bus, like I dropped my homework or whatever.
For sure. And sometimes it's not to say like sometimes you need to say those things out loud, and you need to acknowledge that like this happened to me and it made me feel bad and this wasn't great, but
I feel like naturally, like immediately when you're asked the question, or even reflect yourself, for me anyway, it's like I'll first go to the negative things and easily skip over the good things.
Like what
I'll
mug
be like,
you picked.
oh, I had like a great meal, or like I picked a really good mug this morning. And then I'll be like that. And I guess like we could get into like there's probably like evolutionary reasons for skipping over the good things and recalling the negative things, like for sure, for progressing as like a person. But
we
it's
can
like,
focus on the positive right now because
because I do think it's something that's like beneficial overall, and it's like it takes like some self-awareness. I don't think it's like a natural thing. I think it's something you have to like practice.
It is, but I think we kind of get caught up in the idea that happiness is something that we achieve and you get there and then you're happy, but it really is just like a lifelong a feeling that comes and goes, and it is something that you feel, and you can actually influence how often you feel it. It's not something that you will feel forever because you've achieved this state, but it is something that you can say, oh, if I choose to look at happy moments in my life, I will actually become a happier person.
Right. Yeah. And that that's one thing that was brought up too, is just like a lot of people will be striving for happiness, but that pursuit has like some flaws to it, and meaning is a better pursuit to be striving after, because happiness, like you said, like you're not always going to be happy. So if your goal in life is I got to be happy, there's going to be plenty of times where you're not happy, and you maybe feel like a failure, or you're going to double down on your unhappiness because you're like, I'm unhappy and that's bad, so now I'm going to be even more unhappy about that. But if you're striving for meaning, you recognize that those mood, like you're not always going to be in the best mood, but you're continually just trying to do the right actions. And
so with that being said, so my kind of practical tool that I've been using has made me feel more positive, grateful, more maybe feelings of happiness. Let's talk about practical ways that you can have long-term meaning, because ideally that's like I appreciate what I'm doing and the practical little positive moments in my day. But like I agree with you, Ollie. Meaning is ultimately what will fulfill you in life, and
that instantly makes me think, like, you're probably going to answer this right away, but I'm just wondering, is there like a benefit to longer term meaning? Like, would that be better, having like a goal for like almost your whole life, rather than like these short little goals that you're like accomplishing over like, let's say 1 year periods or something, versus like a 10-year goal?
Like I think one of the most like robust forms of meaning is just continuing to try to develop your character and just becoming it's like cliche, but like the best version of yourself, because that never ends. And and whatever challenges are thrown at you, they're always just a test of your strength, and you're going to continually develop in certain areas. So that goal alone could stay with you for your entire life. So it's goals like that, of like continually trying to develop yourself, continually trying to learn and become the best person you can.
Ollie, can you share, let's say in the next week, what goals do you have that kind of give you meaning? Like, what do you currently do in your life?
Just for my next week?
Yeah, just more short term, just because I know personally for me, sometimes it's overwhelming to think of like big things in life, and sometimes it's just like the short term stuff that does seem more tangible.
You gotta get a couple more mugs maybe.
And I actually want to comment on the mug thing, because sometimes like you might hear people like that, and it could even be frustrating at times, like, because like you could be like, oh man, like COVID's been tough, like this is a tough time, and then you might hear someone like Kailey where they're like, you know what, like you can find happiness in the little things, like check out these mugs. You'd be like, what? Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, but, yeah, it's almost insulting. It's like, how dare you not acknowledge that, like, there's real suffering in the world. And I think that's a whole other discussion that I definitely, my intention is not to disregard that people are experiencing major suffering in the world. Mm-hmm. But I feel like for this podcast in particular, we are speaking about
implementing practices into your own life.
Well, and I'm not trying to say that
disregard other people's situations and how hard given.
No, I like the mug example, because there's definitely little things in my life that I feel like I probably should appreciate a little more, but you can just let them fly by and just
exactly. Like I don't think it would disregard it, but I think it just goes to show Sammy's point that he was saying earlier, that it takes practice, and it would take practice to appreciate the little things. And if you haven't been doing that at all, and you hear somebody being like, wow, this mug is beautiful, this is making me happy, like you might be like, what? Like, if you know what I mean, in that sense, where it could take some time, and for you, maybe a couple years ago you weren't appreciating your mugs like you do now.
Exactly.
And isn't that a shame?
I'm thinking of in my morning, just to maybe paint a little bit more of a detailed picture of what this looks like. So I'll get up and I will think about like, oh, like I just did laundry, which means like I have this fresh pair of socks I've been waiting to use, and like my socks have often like interesting prints on them, so that excites me. It's like, okay, great, the socks, that's fun. I pick out a pair that has Basset Hounds on it. Perfect. Go downstairs. The mugs, let's get excited about the mugs.
You also have a Basset Hound mug, no?
I do have a Basset Hound mug. No real Basset Hound yet.
Soon.
And then I eat the same thing for breakfast every day. I pull out the apple, I look it over and take a moment to say like, oh, this is a sick apple. And then I cut the apple.
Did you say that out loud?
Yo, this is a sick apple.
Sick.
And you think about the apple's journey.
And then I open the drawer of my utensil drawer, and one of my 5 favorite apple cutting knives is in there, because
5 apple cutting knives. My goodness.
Stop. I'm starting to regret this story. But anyway, this is how much I try. Like, it's obviously not all the time, but this is what I mean about the little things adding up. You literally have to practice just looking at everything and go, what is the joy in this? Oh, cool. I like this. I forgot. I washed this thing last night, and now it's ready to go this morning. Cool. Like for me, me, that's my thing. For everyone, it's different, but it's like.
And I think that's a great example of to show that meaning in people's lives is completely unique to the person. My meaning is not going to be the same as yours or anybody's.
Yeah.
And my meaning now at this point in my life might not be the same as it is in 2 years. Meaning is very, very specific. Like, you could never, like, when people always ask the question, like, what's the meaning of life? There is no general answer that covers everything. It's very specific to the individual.
I also feel like, in my experience anyway, it's not like when people will say like there's meaning in life, I feel like you almost just assume that it's just gonna happen to you and you'll be like, oh yes, this is my calling. But in my experience, it's almost like something like along the lines of what Kailey's saying, where it's like you have to actually put effort into it and like sit and kind of just like think about your life and where it's going and like what the meaning could be, and like just kind of have this self-awareness to like understand like
if you told me 5 years ago that complimenting apples and acknowledging my mug collection is what is my meaning in life, I would be like, oh, you silly goose. But it's
complimenting apples.
But can we enough of my what sounds like a real crazy
that's what the podcast life should be called. No, it should be called Grown Apples.
Yes. That's got a deep reference. That's a deep reference.
That's a story for another day.
That's for another time.
But Ollie, can we get back to, if you don't mind, sharing examples of within a week what is in your schedule that kind of helps create meaning in your life?
I feel like a lot of the meaning comes from taking action in one direction or the other. So for me, I have a few things that I want to do every day. I mean, We can get in that
And
spreadsheet.
I would
or
also
not, but
add, like, as you tell this story, like, is there, these are like the short term meanings, but are they adding up to a longer term meaning? And like, how do you kind of find that, if you have like found that?
Right. How did you know that this was kind of something you wanted to work towards? Maybe there's a lot in that, but if you can just kind of share what
Right.
you can.
yeah. I think for me, like I was saying, one of the more like robust forms of meaning is trying to just continually develop yourself. That's one of the bigger goals that I have focused for myself. And a lot of a lot of what I'll do in a week, like a shorter time span, is like sub tasks that are in general leading to that same goal. So like pretty much, yeah, like I'll try to work out almost every day, and that like keeping my body fit and sharp,
Yeah.
it provides me with some meaning. And even like in the past week, I was reading that book, Man's Search for Meaning, writing down some notes and stuff, and knowing that I want to do another podcast next week and continue to do these. That's another goal for me to strive for. So
Yeah, I really like what you've said to me in the past, where it's like you'll picture yourself in the future, and there's almost like two different versions
yeah,
that you could be, and one is like a product of like these little things that you've done all along the way, and the other is like a product of like neglecting these things, and it's just kind of like taking the time to kind of just like, I guess, like look into the future at like what is possible,
yeah,
or like the kind of suffering that you could put yourself into if you're not like trying to better yourself, basically.
yeah. Like I think encouraging people to recognize that there's such a wide amount of potential that they have within themselves that is like unexplored is one thing. And then also maybe even putting into their mind the perspective of I always really like this quote. There's Confucius, this like Chinese philosopher. He said like everybody lives two lives. The second begins when he realizes he only has one.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, it's like just like a fun little quote there, but basically like the second part of your life is going to begin when you really commit to realizing that I only have one life. And that like hopefully makes you recognize like the finality of your life, like it's going to end and you only have a certain amount of time. So and then that in combination with realizing how much potential you could actually achieve, you might as well go achieve it. You don't have a lot of like you don't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
You got this one life. You got a lot of potential out there. So and then that potential, your potential is left unexplored unless you take the action towards it. So for me, and there's a lot of barriers in the way. There's a lot of like things that are going to block you and make you not take action. Like for me, even with this podcast, I had so many thoughts about like, I don't know if I should do this. What am I doing here? Like, I don't know. This is kind of crazy. Like, I don't know if I should even spend the time doing this. This might not be anything, but like,
yeah. And I also have the same thoughts about like this podcast coming on here as well. But then like, I feel like you almost have to ask yourself like, why do I have these thoughts? And basically for me, it's because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And then when you, because this is basically an example of a potential. Who knows what this podcast could end up leading to? Maybe I only do it for a few weeks and that's it, or maybe I do it for years. Who knows? Like it's just an unexplored potential, and how good could we improve on this podcast? That's also unknown. So it's if you don't take the steps and you get blocked by the doubts and the fears and all that stuff. First, very importantly, you're missing out on the meaningful goal of pursuing a meaningful goal because you got blocked by the fears and all that. And
yeah, I also like the idea of putting yourself like willingly into an uncomfortable situation, like and just like kind of having the understanding of like the struggles are like what brings the growth, and it's like they're probably going to happen to you out in the real world, so you might as well just like start putting yourself into these situations so that you will develop anyway, you know?
It's not the life of completely withdrawing from any of the challenges that is going to provide you with mental health and meaning in life. Like I like the example of like if there's somebody who lays on the beach all day, maybe they're just drinking like rum and cokes, like versus somebody who adventures out into the sea, and there'll be storms, there'll be rough weather, but maybe they find new land, and it's like it's a journey. They're chasing a goal. Maybe for the first week, the guy who's chilling on the beach is like, this is awesome. I'm just chilling. Like, this is fun. And the first week, the other guy's out at sea, and he's like, man, this is crazy. Like, this is rough waters. Like, well, I should have just hung out on the beach. What am I doing here? But as the months and months go by, just chilling on the beach isn't really something that can sustain you for your whole life. It's like because you don't go on vacation forever, right? You don't just you need these goals, and it's like a innate like human thing to be pursuing goals. So that reminded me of that. Yeah, just what you were saying there, Sammy.
And I definitely find for me, like personally, I think that the happiness comes from like productivity and like setting goals and basically just doing things.
Right.
Like you can't just like sit and almost like think yourself happy. Right. It just doesn't really work like that.
I think you just said an important thing, which is perhaps one of the first steps is introspection and self-awareness, because you can try what other people are doing, and it's kind of like a trial or error, because perhaps, Sammy, you try the technique I've been using, which is just to find happiness.
Get some Basset Hound merch.
Yeah, exactly. Or you could reflect on currently what in your life and previous experience has kind of challenged you in ways you want to continue to be challenged, what has brought you joy, what has worked, what hasn't, because, you know, not and like you said, Ollie, everyone is very unique. Their situations are unique, because for me, productivity doesn't necessarily equate to feeling my best or feeling happy. It's certainly something I want to be in life.
Relationships more.
But yeah, actually emotional connection to me is like, so I instantly am like at the, like just feeling like the best I can be when I feel emotionally connected to people. And so just the idea that as we're speaking, I'm seeing just between us that different things will work for us. And what I'm hearing is that I should continue to self-reflect and kind of look at myself and not so much look at you and go, oh, productivity, I should be more productive like Sammy, but rather, what works for me? What do I get fulfillment out of?
Yeah, that's a good point, because you might there might be a tendency to do that, to be like, I don't know what's meaningful, so you look out at other people and be like, oh, what are they doing? I'll do that. But
and there's nothing wrong with trying things
for sure
out, but
you could get some good inspiration from what other people are doing, and potentially what they are doing will also provide you with meaning. But like you're saying, it often is extremely unique, and you kind of want to do the internal reflection to figure out, like, what do I really value, what do I really find meaningful. And I want to touch on a point there you mentioned, Sammy, of how the meaning a lot of the time is found in going towards the goal, not necessarily in getting the goal. And like you see that with so many things, where a lot of the time once you finally achieve what you thought you wanted to achieve for so long, shortly after maybe you're even like depressed. You're like, what? I thought I wanted this. But the most meaningful thing is actually just continuing to struggle and strive and go towards the goal. That's why never-ending goals are great. Like never-ending ones, like trying to continually develop your character, because that'll never stop. Like, and it's always a struggle.
Maintaining your health or something. Right?
That's
it's like you never really reach a point where it's like, oh, I'm healthy now, and you stop. It's like this continuous thing, and I think that is the what brings the happiness. I mean, just
my advice is don't ever stop collecting mugs.
Don't ever stop collecting mugs.
No, that's and actually that's like an exceptional ability you have, Kailey, of like
if you're gonna take one thing away from this podcast,
to be grateful of the little, like people always tell you, be grateful of the little things, like appreciate them, and you are a shining example.
Seriously though, because you don't need some big extravagant goals either to like to basically find the meaning or like happiness, I guess.
Like, I'm not joking. Sometimes I'll fill my water bottle up the night before I go to bed, and I'll put it by my now working from home desk, my work desk. And when I wake up in the morning, I take this moment just to go, sick, my water bottle's full already.
You're like, who did this? You look in the mirror, you're like, you did.
Was it me?
You're so good.
Pointing at yourself in the mirror.
But then at the end of the day,
you deserve a sick
when
apple.
I'm falling asleep, what am I thinking about? I just have that good feeling of, wow, a lot of things were cool today.
No, and that's awesome. And
that's great. I'm envious.
I feel like
of that.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like something for me is like basically trying to ignore like what society values as like important in life. And like you kind of just feel like if you were just going to talk about kind of meaning in general, like from like going through the school system and stuff, it's like basically puts your goal as like getting a job with like a decent salary, and then you're kind of just like, a doctor is better than like a janitor for sure, and I should definitely do these things. And then as you kind of fall short from those goals, it's easy to get like discouraged, and I think basically fall into like depression and stuff like that. But then kind of just like if you can kind of forget about that societal pressure that exists and find like meaning in mugs or water bottles or like happiness and like there's
you are doing
and kind of understanding that there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's so individual that you can kind of generate the meaning from anything you want, basically.
Yeah, I another just inside my interesting mind is I actually sometimes will say out loud or say to myself internally, stay in your own lane. Like when I'm thinking about things or starting to get a little caught up in the what's everyone else doing, where am I at in life compared to other people, and I literally just stop and go, stay in your own lane. And it's like
I've heard you say that too, and I also think about that too, and I'll like literally think about like a track and field racetrack, how they start everybody at like a different thing, but they're all going the same distance.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I also something I saw recently, you know, the saying we're all in the same boat, which has a nice sentiment to it, and I appreciate when people are their intention when they say that. But then I saw someone who had kind of written on with the lines of that is like, we're all in the same storm, but like some of us are in kayaks, some of us are in yachts, some of us are like on a like a dinghy life raft, and it's like the idea that just work with what you have in that time, because we're not all going to be at the same place, and that's that. And for some of us, the storm's gonna just go right by us, and that's not where we're
I like that.
And yeah, that's cool. And to get like more, I guess, literal with it, like I might even enjoy being on a kayak more than a yacht.
Yeah, right. We know someone who would.
And even to like further that a little bit, it might be like we're all on different things, but we're not experiencing the storm exactly the same. Like if you had a storm in Ottawa, maybe in the East End it's different than the West End. So like everybody's storm is going to be slightly different. And if you were to say COVID is a storm, not everybody's experiencing the exact same storm, and they're also not in the same vehicle. So it's just like everybody's there's so much uniqueness to it. I wanted to touch on the society, because like you guys mentioned kind of staying in your own lane, and I feel like in society a lot of time there's so many distractions or things that could pull you away from meaningful stuff. I feel like one of the biggest things that is competing with you going towards meaningful goals is like instant gratification, like pleasures. And there's so many of them. There are very plenty these days. It's just like you could, whether it's like I don't know, very like pleasurable food, or like watching TV or video games or whatever's gonna like suck you in and steal your attention. With social media, there's so many things that can grab your attention and pull you in, and when they're pulling you in, they're taking you away from potentially meaningful actions that you could be taking. And I'm not saying that you just never want to be doing those things, of course not, but I'm just saying as society in general, I feel like we get pulled far too much into those cavities, those directions towards just meaningless pleasure. I always think about like
taking a step, like if you could like just like zoom out and you were like working on like a like yourself, like it was like a video game, like you're like a sim character or something,
Yeah.
and you were just like looking at this timeline, like it was really quick, and you're like, I want to go from baby to like being this like successful person, and then there was like checklists that were like
Okay.
like, no, you know what it,
Yeah, that was just funny. I want to go from baby to successful.
but it's like there's like these like checklists, and it's like, okay, I definitely want to not eat junk food all the time. I don't want to just like sit and watch TV. I want to do less social media. I want to like have these emotional connections with like these people who like I really like. But then it's like, and like that's so easy, like looking at that from that perspective, and you're like, I just have to do those things, and it's so simple, and then you just like become what you want to be. But then when you're in the situations and the instant gratification like comes into play, I feel like it's just like you just start making the bad decisions one after another.
So
and it's like,
how do you not do that? Like what?
I don't know. I think it's like basically practice. Like I don't think it's something that's easy to do, but it's like takes a lot of self-awareness and just like practicing things.
Yeah, I think that's working on habits a little bit. And I wanted to touch a bit on this, the role that like dopamine plays in what you end up doing. And a lot of these simple like pleasurable things like food or drugs or whatever or like, sorry, not food but junk food, like very, very sugary food, it'll provide you with an instant dopamine hit. And dopamine is it's like a hormone or a neurotransmitter that really is great for reinforcing habits. As like a human being, when you're getting dopamine hits, it's like it's a sign that this is something good, basically. So that's why it reinforces the habit in your mind. It's like, okay, these are good things to go. They provide us with goodness, and that's why it's so easy to get sucked into those things and and have them turn into habits. Because when you're like watching like a funny little video on TikTok, it's like you're getting maybe little hits of dopamine. When you're like eating your like your cupcakes, you're getting like little spikes of dopamine. And the problem is, if that's the only source of like dopamine in your life and you don't have a meaningful alternative, you're going to get even sucked into those things even more. Because because what happens when you're deficient in dopamine and you kind of have lower levels is you're going to start to experience depression, anxiety, hopelessness, and all this stuff. So if you're feeling all that, but then you get a couple of hits of dopamine from, it could be drugs, alcohol, food, whatever it is, you're going to be getting some dopamine when you currently aren't really getting much. Right. And that's why, that's why when you're depressed,
that's a great explanation, by the way. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, thank you. But so that stuff, it can really suck you in, especially when you're already feeling depressed. But one really interesting thing that I heard about dopamine, I was listening to a podcast, this neuroscientist Andrew Huberman, he's got a good podcast, but he was mentioning that dopamine is also released when you feel like you're on the right path in life. And that path is very, very subjective. So if you're on the right, like a practical example of this would be, let's say you're dieting and you're trying to avoid like your treats that you always eat, and you want to eat maybe like some like chicken and vegetables, whatever it is. So what you're essentially going to be doing when you're turning down the junk food is you're turning down that little hit of dopamine, but as a result you're going towards a healthier alternative. But that healthier alternative may actually provide you with some dopamine as well, because as you're eating it, you feel like I'm on the right path. I'm on the path that I want to be on. My goal is to lose weight and be healthier, and as I'm eating this is the path I want to be on. So you're actually going to be getting little hits of dopamine because of that, because you're on the right path.
I see.
So dopamine is also like a form of neural energy. It kind of provides you with motivation and like guides you in certain directions.
Okay.
And this is what, have you guys ever been running where you might be feeling exhausted, but you're listening to music and a great song comes on?
Yes.
And it boosts you up, and now you have more energy.
Mm-hmm.
What that is you got dopamine released, and that gave you a little bit of neural energy. You didn't get more physical energy. Like, they've done studies on this. You didn't, when you're listening to music and stuff and you get that boost, it's not because you all of a sudden got more fuel in your muscles or in your liver or whatever. It's because you had a neural fuel. And so these things actually encourage you to go further. So maybe you were like exhausted, and then you get a little hit of dopamine, and then you go further. And another example, instead of the music, could be maybe you were running, and then all of a sudden a thought popped into your mind about like, no, you know how important this is to me to be running?
Right.
And that is an example of getting a hit of dopamine when you feel like you're on the right path.
Right, because I was just going to say, like, which you basically just answered, but can this neural energy be like basically self-released in a sense? Like, so you're not relying on any of these external sources like music and stuff, but you yourself are like controlling the ship and like kind of what is motivating you.
Yeah, from what I understand, it could be one or the other, and you could be somebody who is pretty much more using the dopamine release from being on the right path, and maybe you're not using it at all from being from listening to music. But it can come in other areas too. Humor is one. Like, if you've ever been in a tough situation and you feel exhausted, someone cracks a joke, and all of a sudden you feel like you have more energy.
Yeah.
That's what's happening.
Very
You got like a little
interesting.
spike of dopamine, and you're like, wow, this is great. I can keep going. So there's like humor is one, music is one, feeling like you're on the right path is one.
That's interesting, because you never, like, I mean, I never think about those things, but it definitely, like, now that you mention it, like, for sure, like, humor can keep you going.
Yeah.
Like,
And I really like the one about being on the right path, because I feel like that perfectly ties into how important meaning is for your life, because that's what it is.
I also
You're
like
on the right path.
I also like the idea that you could essentially be getting these like dopamine kind of gratifications from essentially like doing nothing, which is like kind of an interesting thought.
Yeah,
like
yeah.
in the
You could
way
be
that
reading,
like
and you're getting hits.
all you have to do is like just not eat the cupcake, and then you're on the right path.
Yeah. There has to be a path though, because like if you didn't have an aim for if you were eating healthy, like if you just stop eating cupcakes and you don't have another goal, you may not be getting all the other hits, because then in your mind you're just missing out on a quick hit of dopamine, and there's no other alternative.
Right.
But if you have a serious goal of like, no, this is so important for me to get healthy, so that's why I'm going to avoid all these cupcakes.
Right.
That's where you might actually end up being happier. And that's one thing about the meaningful path, often ends up being the happier path anyway, because you're going to be getting these good feelings, these like dopamine releases. So
yeah, I'm kind of realizing as you're talking, Ollie, the importance of education as well and understanding the body, because just the way that you've explained dopamine to me, and how it all works and how it can kind of be created, I am like, wow, that's something I didn't know before, and now I do, and that can help with my meaningful journey of life, of just knowing what's happening in my body and what I can control versus what I can't control, and what, you know. I think that's cool.
And it's interesting how reinforcing for habits dopamine is. And then in that sense, if you continually are getting dopamine from striving towards meaningful goals, you're going to start to build the habit of, oh, this is what is providing me with great things. I'm going to keep doing this stuff. Versus the other side is, like things like drugs and alcohol can give you kind of like unnatural levels of dopamine hits, but they also are going to reinforce habits, unfortunately. And that's like addiction. Like you're addicted to the good feelings that those things provide you with, but they're a bit of a trap. And I really like that idea when I heard it on the podcast about how it's being on the right path, and it's so subjective too. Like you could even be on a path that society generally deems as like negative, but you might feel like you're on the right path. Like,
Right.
I was thinking, how like recently all those guys stormed the U.S. Capitol.
Yeah.
Even them, they might have been thinking like, whatever the thought process in their mind was, they might have been thinking like, we got to do this. This is the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And as they're going to do it, as they're like suiting up or whatever, they're probably like, this is the right path, and they're feeling good about it.
Yeah.
But anybody can be, the right path is totally subjective. Right path doesn't, it's just, depends on the person.
That's interesting.
Just like meaning is very, 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 very individual. So
I feel like that's a whole other concept of just like thinking about how like basically the right path could lead you to be doing the wrong things.
yeah,
Or
you may feel
your perceived correct path.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
but
it's interesting.
yeah, I mean, we've done a little over an hour now, so, and I'm sure we could keep going a little bit, but more for the other weeks. Save these topics
maybe
Yeah,
we'll
for
wrap
sure.
up.
The habits has really intrigued me. We'll have to do a
Yeah.
episode on habits.
I think to sum up, kind of, you basically want to be less like a deer doing deer things.
Yeah, that's the main moral.
And
of the
more
whole-
like a self-aware person who's doing things purposefully and like for the correct reasons.
Yeah, don't be a deer doing deer things, and think about yourself as baby trying to transition to being successful. So those are the main takeaways from the podcast. But
Thank you for having us, Ollie. It's been great.
yeah, I mean, you guys live here too, so yeah. So thank you for having me. But yeah, we'll have hopefully some interesting topics in the future, and for anybody who listens to this, any feedback or suggestions for podcasts in the future are definitely recommended. Or even if you want to be on the podcast when COVID is over, I'll gladly have whoever wants to be on. So
Thank you for
Yeah.
listening.
thanks. Goodbye,
Great.
everybody.
Thank you.